Alrighty, I see some people are beginning to join us. We'll give it just a few minutes, allow more people to enter the room. Okay, then I believe we will go ahead and get started. Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to SEO's April webinar on how to be a competitive applicant. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. My name is Avery Cunningham. I am a Student Services and Admissions Officer here at SEO. I am one of the admissions team members who answers your admissions questions and participates in the admissions process. Before we get started, I ask that we all use proper Zoom etiquette by keeping microphones muted unless speaking, limiting background noise, and respecting all of this webinar's attendees and facilitators. We will have time for questions towards the end of the webinar, but in the meantime, if you do have any questions or concerns that need immediate attention, please use your chat feature to communicate with us. Today, our Director of Admissions and Enrollment Services, Mike Robertson, will be providing a thorough overview of SEO standards when it comes to identifying an applicant as competitive. Also, two of our student ambassadors, Anna and Aniel, will be sharing their own insights around how they approach their application and what recommendations they have for future students who wish to stand out. Everyone, would you mind introducing yourselves real quickly?
Yes, hello. I am Anna Britt, so I am in the class of 2023. That means I am a second-year student here at SEO, and I actually grew up in Georgia and graduated from the University of Georgia before starting here.
Hi, I'm Aniel. I'm a third-year student, and I'm also a University of Georgia grad.
And I'm Mike Robertson. I'm the Director of Admissions and been at SEO a long time. And these two young ladies went to the wrong Bulldog school. I went to the right one. I went to Mississippi State. So we got an all Bulldog crowd tonight.
Okay, wonderful. Well, before we turn it over to Mr. Robertson, I will let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and will be free and available to view starting tomorrow on our website. All right, Mr. Robertson, turning over to you.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that it's free because I was planning on selling it to anybody who would pay me, but since it's free, I won't do that. Well, welcome to the April webinar, as Avery said, and I'm just going to give you some insight. The two young ladies who were with us tonight are probably better at answering things than I am because they have both been admitted, and I never applied to optometry school. I am not an optometrist. But just to give you an overview, we're going to go through the process of applying, what you need to do to be competitive. I'll give you a little bit of advice, talk about what the, I hate to say typical student looks like, but maybe what an average student looks like in an entering class. And then I'm going to turn it over to the young ladies to answer questions that they have that we prepared for them ahead of time. So let's get the ball rolling. Okay. What's more important, OAT or GPA? The answer is both. And the reason I say that is because both of them are pretty equal in importance, although SEO does stress the OAT more than some schools probably. And the reason we do that is because we did some research several years ago and looked at some correlations of OAT performance and national board performance. And we have found that those who perform low on the OAT tend to do the same thing on national boards. So there's no magic number, there's no magic formula, and there's certainly no fate that can be accomplished by you having a certain OAT score. But just like most decisions in life, you do the research, you go with the solid answer, what that research shows you. And so that's what we do. So for us, a score below 300 has not been acceptable for probably 25 years or more. And the 300 is the 50th percentile. So you don't have to make a 300 in each section, but you do need to have a 300 overall and try to have a 300 for your total science. So the next thing, should I retake the OAT or the physics class I didn't ace? I usually say, as far as classes go, it depends on what you learned in the class. You know, we've all had classes that we might have made a C in that we really felt very good about the knowledge we gained. And then we've had classes we made C's in that that wasn't so good. So I don't always recommend retaking classes unless, of course, they are a D or an F, and then I do. But if it's a C, I leave that up to you. And when you take that OAT, it's a very expensive endeavor. I'm just going to be blunt about it. And you don't want to, I've had many, many candidates tell me before, I just took it the first time just to see what it was like. Don't do that. That's too expensive of a test to take it just to see what it's like. So if you take the test, you don't get a competitive score. And again, that means at least 300, you might want to retake it. But your GPA is going to come into play. So let's just say you've got a 3.5 and you're as smart as Anna and Aniel. Well, if that's the case, then a 300 will probably be competitive for admission. But let's say you have a GPA closer to what I had in undergrad, and it's below a 3 point maybe, and you make a 300, then I'm going to tell you to retake it, that you should shoot for a 320, 330 or better. So it's like we say, it's a sliding scale, and the higher GPA, the lower your OAT score can be, and then the vice versa of that. As far as shadowing, again, the pandemic has changed everything. And what we normally say is 30 to 40 hours in at least 2 settings. Now that doesn't mean 30 to 40 in each. That means a cumulative total of at least 30 to 40. But I think it's important to know that sometimes you're going to compete against candidates who have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours. Do we require that? No. Am I telling you you need to have that many? No. But I think it's important for you to know. Anna and Aniel are both from Georgia. Georgia is a contract state, and that means the state of Georgia helps pay part of the tuition for for a limited number of students. But to be competitive for that seat, right now there's 6 seats we award each year for Georgia. So let's just say that we're down to the 6th one, and both of you look pretty similar on paper, but we see that one of you has shadowed in 4 settings and has spent lots of time doing that, whereas the other one went to 1 office and got in 25 hours. Well, the tie could go to the one who has the more shadowing. But I don't want to make it just like a perfunctory task. I think what's important is you getting a better knowledge base for the profession that you have chosen. And to me, I don't know how you can do that in any better way than to shadow. And you might say, well, they're all alike. Well, no, they're really not. You go to one office like a Pearl or a Target, and that's a commercial setting that is vastly different than a private practice. So then you say, okay, I've been to a private practice. Well, was there 1 doctor working? Were there 2 doctors? Were there optometrist and ophthalmologist? Did they perform any vision therapy? Did they send all of their patients out for any type of disease treatment? I mean, there's many ways that an office can be different. And you want to see as many as you can, because that's, like I said, it's going to give you a good, solid foundation of trying to understand what the profession does. Now, in the good old days, I would have told you to go to a veterans hospital, but they no longer allow shadowing, but they are wonderful places to learn about the profession. There are many optometrists in a VA hospital and in some other settings that never do refractions. They never tell you what glasses or contact lenses you need. They are strictly there treating diseases and other abnormalities. And in a certain number of states, they're performing laser procedures. So I don't want you thinking that all you're going to do is prescribe glasses and contact lenses, and that's what shadowing will help you. As far as extracurriculars, I kind of divide it into those who work and those who don't work. If you work 20 hours a week or more, we don't expect to see a ton of extracurriculars. But on the flip side, if you don't have a job, we want to see that you've been involved in your campus. You know, are you in organizations? Have you got any leadership roles? And then the volunteer activities become very important. And again, it doesn't, let's just say you don't have much in that area. That's not probably going to keep you from being admitted if your numbers are competitive, but what it will do is pretty much ensure that you don't get a scholarship as large as some other people, or you don't get that contract seat that students can get, because we're going to look at your entire file, and we want the students who have the most significant backgrounds in helping their communities be better places and helping their campuses to be better places, etc. So literally, I have seen candidates with very similar numbers, and one might get a $15,000 seat or contract per year, and the other one might only get $7,000 because they just weren't involved in their schools. And I saw a question pop up about a contract seat. So I'm gonna go ahead and address that. A contract seat is a seat that one of 9 states will help you go to school. Excuse me. So there are 9 states that we work with that do not have optometry schools. And those states are mainly in the South. And what that means is, since they don't have an optometry school, they will help pay for a certain number of students to go to school. So for example, Georgia, since we have 2 great Georgia students here tonight, the state of Georgia gives $19,000 a year. And $19,000 a year is a lot of money because that's about half of our tuition. So again, not everybody from that state can get that, but 6 can per year. So we could enroll 20 Georgia residents and only 6 would get a contract seat. The other states, and I'm going to try to name them all, are Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, West Virginia, Kansas. Kentucky no longer participates in the program. They have their own separate scholarship. So I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, but again, only a certain number of students from those states can get that contract seat. Okay. All right, we're going to move on from there. And this is just a good timeline and delineation of what you need to do in order to be admitted. And you see first on the is scheduling and taking the OAT. I want to make clear right now that you can take the OAT after you apply. You don't have to take it in order to apply. All you do is indicate the date of your test and on your application, and then we know when to look for a score. So Optumcast, which is the centralized application service, opens on June 30th. Some years it's June 29th, July 1. You don't have to go in the first day, but if you want to compete for scholarships and one of those contract seats, if you're from one of those 9 states, you should try to apply in July or August, without a doubt. And so when it opens, just go in, form your file, and create it, and you'll get an ID number. That ID number will allow you to submit the supplemental application to SCO. That ID number is going to be very important. A couple of tips about the application process. One, the letters of reference do not have to be on file in order for you to complete your application. I can invite you for an interview with 0 letters of reference on file. I may not feel comfortable, so I may not do it, but I had that option. What I cannot do is invite you for an interview and your file has not been verified. Verified means audited. And for Optumcast, verification comes when you have submitted all your transcripts. And when I say all of them, don't think because you went to the University of Georgia and they put your transfer credits from a community college on there that we don't need, or Optumcast doesn't need that community college transcript. They do. So you have to send an official transcript from every single school that you ever attended. And that includes if you were in high school and you got college credit, AP credit, CLEP credit, whatever. The school that transcripted it has to send a transcript to Optumcast. Your 2 letters of reference, one has to be from an optometrist with whom you have worked or shadowed. The second needs to be from either your pre-optometry advisor, or it could be from a professor who has taught you either biology, physics, or chemistry. So just remember, they're not the biggest portion of your application, but they are important pieces. The same thing with the personal statement. It really bothers me when the applicants say that the reason they were late applying is because they just couldn't figure out what to say in their personal statement. You need to get over that real fast. We want you to write something that's succinct and tells us who you are, but we don't need a short novel that's perfect. Get people to proof your essay, but it's basically telling us who you are without repeating everything that you're going to tell us in the next section of the application, which is called experiences. And that's where you put your shadowing, your employment, your extracurriculars, etc. Don't tell me about high school. That's not really important at this stage. What we want to know are the things you've done since you went to college. It does not mean if we put down shadowing experience that you only have to list shadowing of an optometrist. One of the best ways to figure out that you want to be an optometrist is to shadow somebody else in a health profession, a medical physician or a dentist or a physical therapist or whoever. But the key is you want to tell us those things. So many applicants leave those sections blank. And if it's blank, I'm going to hold your application and contact you and say, I need some answers here so we can make a well-educated decision. As I said before, you can submit the SCO application as soon as you have an Optumcast ID. And as far as timing of that application, generally we say apply in the summer between your junior and senior year. Now, there's always a caveat to anything that I say. And first off, you can be admitted, technically, you can be admitted to optometry school with only 3 years of education. So 90 hours at an undergraduate school. It is extremely difficult. We enroll 136 students, and most years 135 or 136 have their degree. You really want that degree for professional reasons. It's going to give you a lot more clout. It's going to enhance your profile. And really, your 4th year of undergrad is usually the best year of your life, quite frankly. So why give that up? So we strongly encourage you to finish school, but apply in that summer between your junior and senior years. If you're graduating in December and not going all the way through, same thing applies. You would want to apply in that summer, in July, August, sometime around that. I see a question. Well, let's just go from there for the interview. If your file is competitive and you have good shadowing experience, good work experience, good extracurriculars, etc., once your Optumcast file is verified, we can invite you for an interview. Now, the big question is, are we going back to on-campus interviews? And my answer is, I don't know. We had on-campus interviews for decades. And then last year, of course, with the pandemic, we went to virtual interviews. I personally don't like the virtual quite as much. I think everybody should come see a campus. Now, if we do have virtual, we can allow you to come for a tour after your interview. So there's still a chance to see the school. But the interview is where you get to check us out and we get to check you out, to be quite blunt. So you've got to be competitive for that. And sometimes a candidate will say, well, what's going to get me an interview? Well, it depends on the time of year. In July, August, September, those tend to be, in October, we tend to be interviewing the candidates with the best files, those really good GPAs and really good OATs and really good experience. So just because you don't get an interview right away doesn't mean you can't be interviewed. We generally interview from mid-August until mid-March. So there's a long period in there where you have an opportunity to be interviewed. Okay, let's move on from here and talk about the nitty-gritty, as I call it. There you see, take the OAT early. Again, you want to take that in the end of your junior year, or you could take it earlier if you have taken all the prerequisites. Remember, biochem is not on the OAT, nor is microbiology. So you don't have to have those in order to take the test. I will tell you this, they're gonna go all the way back to freshman biology. So don't think you can take the TED and you say, oh, well, I've had anatomy and physiology, I'll do great in biology. No, they're gonna go back and ask you about the birds and the bees and the bugs and the insects. So you have to go all the way back to the beginning and study. So keep that in mind. Apply as soon as possible. Again, that just before September 1 is so important. Again, remember, Optumcast cannot verify your file if you don't have all the transcripts in. And while we're talking about that, when you apply to Optumcast, they will ask you if you would like what they call professional transcript entry, PTE. And that's where they will take your transcripts and they will enter your courses, because you have to list every single course you've ever taken when you put in your coursework into Optumcast. And they come along and say, hey, we'll do that for you. We'll charge you, I don't even know what it is now, $75 maybe. And we'll do that for you. Do not fall for that. They're gonna take too long, especially if you're trying to compete for scholarships or contract seats. You don't want to have somebody else responsible for finishing your file. It can sometimes take them 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And if you sit down and knock it out, you can probably do it in about an hour. So I do say to avoid the professional transcript entry. Again, familiar with the profession. In addition to shadowing, some students will attend conferences. They'll go with the OD maybe that they work for. You can do a lot of research online. The American Optometric Association has lots of information. The state in which you reside should have a site for their optometric association. You can interview optometrists if you can't shadow. That's what we allowed a lot of people to do this past year. Because of the pandemic. Demonstrate commitment to service. You know, I have to tell students all the time that if you're not into service, you better get into it, because we're gonna make you do it once you get to SCO. There's a service hour requirement every student has. One day we hope to have service honors. You know, you can graduate with Latinized or academic honors. So we one day hope that we can do service honors in the same way. And when you think about it, not only are you making your this world a better place, when you get out into practice, if you have your own practice, there's no better way to recruit a good patient base than to be involved in your community. Join the Lions Club, join the Rotary Club, donate to this cause and that cause, and people start to talk about what a good person you are, and they want to come to you for their optometric care. And never be afraid to ask questions. I've had students over the years, I've been doing this a long time, and There have been a couple of cases, one in particular I can think of, a young man who probably lost $80,000 because he didn't ask questions the way he should have, and he missed out on money. So, you know, and when I say that, I always follow up and say, don't call me every day and ask me what the weather's like in Memphis. You know, you can look that up online. But if you're struggling with a course decision, or you know, you need some advice on should you take this physics or that physics or whatever, ask those questions. That's what we're here for. Okay. Last entering class, 136. That's what we try to take every year. You see 812. I don't want you to think automatically, oh, okay, 812 applied and they accepted 136. No, we probably had to accept 225 because students make decisions to go to other schools, change careers, etc. So it's not like you have a 1 in 8 chance. It's really closer to a 1 in 4 chance. So the odds are not, you know, that bad. Degrees you see there, I told you everybody but one came in with a degree. Several classes will have students with masters. We've even had PhD complete his optometry degree. Average GPA and average OAT. I don't want anybody to start crying and say, I don't have a 3.65. Okay, that's fine. A lot of people don't have 3.65s. And averages combined lower GPAs and higher GPAs. So really what you want to know are the ranges. And what I tell people is the range for the 08 for the GPA is usually 2.8 to 4.0. Now, obviously a lot of 2.8s are not being admitted, or that average would be much lower. But sometimes you start school and you perform poorly as a freshman and you spend the next 3 years trying to make up for that deficit. And guess what? It never really gets much higher. We are going to look at your last 2 years of work much more closely than we are your first 2 years. So let's just say you've got that 2.95 or 3 point or whatever. We are going to look for a higher OAT from you. So you need to be closer to that 330 than you are to a 300. And again, like I said before, let's say you've got a 3.65. Well, you could probably be competitive with the 300 on the OAT. What becomes important though is sometimes retaking the OAT and getting a higher score makes you more competitive for scholarships. So sometimes I encourage candidates with really high GPAs that get a mediocre OAT to contact us because we may suggest retaking in order to increase your chances for a scholarship. Okay, applying early, beginning a year in advance. That's really what you're doing now. If you're going to be applying for next year, you're already listening to webinars and taking advice. Apply before October if at all possible. And then there you see just a little bit of a timeline, basically what I've stressed before. If you have a really good file, you can be admitted and ready to roll before your senior year ever starts. Now that's a little difficult, but it does happen. So if you apply in July, you're very competitive, we interview you, offer you a seat in August, you go to your senior year not even having to worry about a decision. Okay, and there you have it. No hard set minimums, but there are truths. We have a note on our webpage that says, if you have below a 2.5, please contact the school before applying. And basically that is to tell you don't apply. Below a 2.5 is just almost impossible. I don't know if I've ever admitted anybody with a 2.5. Again, we've gone to 2.7, 2.75, and those are usually extenuating circumstances. We do have a little rule of thumb that if you score below 310 or even 310 sometimes, that you need to retake. And let me emphasize, I keep talking about these 300s and 310s. I've seen 320s that had a 280 in science, and that's not good. You want to try to have a science score of at least 300. and we look closely. What usually happens is you get a really good score on the quant section and on the reading comp, but all your science scores are low. I will tell you now that physics is the lowest score nationally. The average score on physics drops to about 290 instead of 300 in the other sections. So go into that test knowing that physics is a booger, as I call it, and you're going to really have to buckle down. And don't think, oh, well, I made A's in both my physics. Well, that's nice. I see A's in physics a lot, and then I see 240s and 250s in the physics section. So you don't want that one section, whether it's physics, organic, or whatever, to cause you to have to retake. And sometimes it does. Or again, it puts you out of line for scholarship consideration. As far as the prerequisites, you know, a lot of people had to go to online courses, and so we got questions. Do you accept pass, fail? We really want a grade, a letter grade, but if you have an option, you should take the letter grade. But if you don't, we will accept pass. You just have to know that if your GPA is not stellar, a lot of passes are not going to do anything to help it. And just like I said before, when you get lower grades, what is your comfort level with the material? And then sometimes you say, well, I'm just not sure. Well, then retake the course or take another course in that because that's going to prep you for the OAT. A lot of times we tell candidates to do that, especially if someone has graduated years ago and they have to go back to school and take classes. But that's, again, where we come into play. And you can say, you can just lay it out there. Here's my GPA, here's my OAT, or, you know, what do you think I'm going to need to be competitive? We've done this a long time. We've got a lot of experience in our office, so just contact us. Okay, there's that shadowing. It won't go away, and it's never going to go away. And you see at least 3 different modes. You know, sometimes 2 is okay. Again, it's not a perfunctory task. It's to help you. And the way I tell students or applicants is it's free education. You know, we're going to charge you for all that shadowing type activity when you come to school. So take advantage of what you can get free. And if you do, if you're a nice person, they may hire you and then you can get paid. But I do want to make sure you understand that we don't penalize people who don't work for an OD. Sometimes candidates worry that, okay, I only have shadowing. I never worked for an optometrist. That's okay. I mean, it's great that you can, but it's not like it's required. Another thing that's very important is you've got to, you'll learn this a lot. We'll preach this a lot when you come to school, but a state legislature determines what you do as an optometrist. And that's one way that optometry is different than, say, a medical doctor. And the reason I say that, think about it, when you're a medical doctor, there's no law that says you must do X, Y, and Z when you're treating a cold or the flu or whatever, and that you must have had a course in treating the flu. Well, for optometry, it's different. And state legislatures pass laws that determine exactly what you can do as a practitioner. And some states are very liberal, and the most liberal states are in the South, believe it or not. Louisiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, Arkansas, all have some form of laser treatment right now. Oklahoma also. The states on the West Coast and the East Coast are probably going to be the last to ever get laser treatments allowed by optometrists. And one of the reasons is because of the South is more rural, and rural people need good health care just like people in cities, but you don't find lots of ophthalmologists on every corner in a small town. So the legislature is more likely to listen to the rationale for allowing an optometrist to expand his or her boundaries as a practitioner. So you need to know that up front, because you're going to be involved in politics whether you want to or not, unless you don't care what your profession does. And I don't think you would be listening to this if you didn't care. The other thing is, of course, just the current affair of healthcare in the country. You know, a lot of people talk about the Affordable Care Act, and some like and some don't like, but I can tell you from an optometrist perspective, it was wonderful. It changed many things for the profession of optometry that had never been allowed before. So you've got to stay aware of these types of issues, because they're going to dictate what you do when you graduate. Okay. These are just really things that are going to be important, not just for optometry school, but for the rest of your life. I mean, when you, a lot of people tell us, well, I want to be an optometrist because it's not as stressful, and I don't have to deal with blood. And, you know, I'm not saying that you're going to deal with blood every day, but, you know, you might be dealing with it more than you think. You're also going to, people say I don't have to deal with death. Well, you know, you don't deal with it like a medical doctor, but optometrists often diagnose brain tumors and glaucoma and deadly diseases. So yes, you are going to in some way. So you've really got to be a good all-around person. And that's by learning to deal with people. Sometimes applicants ask me, what's the best thing I can do to prepare for professional school? And I usually say, if you've never worked in a restaurant or a bar or at a clothes counter or a perfume counter in a department store, there you go. That's what you need to do, because you've got to learn to deal with people in all types of situations. You've got to be ready for people to be mean to you and people to be nasty. And not that all your patients are going to do that, but it's different people that make your practice a better place. And at SCO, we're going to make you work with homeless people, with mentally ill people, with people who may not have access to the same health care as you and I do. And they deserve the same quality of care that you get. And so you've got to be ready for that. You've got to be ready to deal with somebody who looks different than you, talks differently than you, who might not smell so great, quite frankly. You know, dealing with the public is going to help you with that. The same thing with service. If you get out and help your fellow citizen, you're going to get to know people better. You're going to get to know different cultures better. And that's all going to play in your ability to be a good healthcare provider. Okay, first thing on this list, use appropriate etiquette. For those of you who've never dealt in etiquette, let me tell you what that means. That means if you've never met me before and you write me and you say, hey, or hey, you, or something like that, that's totally inappropriate. I don't have any problem with my students calling me Mike. Some of them say I'm too old to do that. That's okay. But if I've never met you, to me, it's just a little disrespectful. So maybe you start off calling me Mr. Robertson and you call Avery Miss Cunningham. And if she's uncomfortable and wants you to call her Avery, she'll tell you. But you need to get in that habit. And a lot of times we get communication from people. And the first thing, if you call me, introduce yourself. A lot of people will call and just start shouting out questions, and it's like, well, who am I talking to? So be professional in your communication. And when you write, I know email is easy to do in a very casual manner, but you are writing professional people. So, you know, again, you don't have to be a stiff person, but you just want to show respect, and then people will show you that respect. The same thing goes for questions. do not call me and say, hey, can you tell me what classes I need to take, when our website is there with everything listed. You know, I don't mind telling you, okay, this physics over that physics or something like that. But you have to take responsibility for yourself. And one way to demonstrate to us that you're doing that is to at least do some research on your own, because we're not going to be there in the classroom with you handling your coursework. So demonstrate to us up front that you went ahead, you reviewed the information, but now you've got questions based on that. The other thing is, and this is a pet peeve for me, and I hope nobody in the audience has done this to me, is don't send me an email and then 2 minutes later call me. I'm pretty good about answering email, and I usually answer it very quickly. I think these two young ladies on here will vouch for that. But you know, when you write me and I'm literally in the process of responding to you, and then you call with the same question, it's just a little disconcerting. So, you know, my personal timeline is 24 hours most of the time. You know, that should be give most people a chance to get back to you. Sometimes maybe a little more. So just give people a little time. I know you may be antsy. Then you're really antsy, then call and don't send the email. And again, ask the questions. If you don't ask it, then we don't know. We can't answer it for you.
All righty. Thank you so much, Mr. Robertson. We're going to turn over to our student Q&A portion of the evening. Now, I will say that there may be a chance that we end up going over a little bit and end up wrapping closer to, like say 7:15. I understand if anybody cannot stay that long on the call, you are free to sign off. This webinar will be recorded and made available for everybody to view and participate in later. But for those who are willing to stay, we may end up going a little bit longer just to accommodate everyone's time and accommodate everyone's questions. But yes, we're going to turn this over now to our two student ambassadors to tell us a little bit about your experience preparing for the application and any advice you have for students to help their application stand out. So let's start off with, when did you two begin preparing for your optometry school application?
I can start for us. So mine was a little bit more untraditional, I would say. Throughout undergrad, I was kind of weighing my options of what kind of healthcare profession that I wanted to go into. So I had shadowed probably every other healthcare profession prior to optometry. I ended up taking a gap year, and during that gap year is when I really started preparing my application, getting everything together, and probably over the course of a year, gained shadowing experience, got my letters of recommendation, and really started to get everything together.
Yeah, my situation was also very similar. I was a non-traditional student. I had been out of school for 2 years. And so I knew that I wanted to go to optometry school after shadowing, and I also shadowed different professions. But I definitely took some time with applying. When the Optumcast opened up, I would definitely advise to be familiar with the website, even if you don't, submit your application that day. So I really just started opening it up, seeing what I needed to submit, talking to different advisors for different schools, and then just working throughout my on my application throughout that time. I did have a timeline that I had set for myself on when I wanted to get my letters of reference in, when I wanted to finish my personal statement, and when I wanted to submit my finalized application for everything, which I highly recommend.
Wonderful, thank you. So next question, how did you both gain your shadowing experience?
So for me, the first person I ended up shadowing was actually a family friend. And that was a great experience because it kind of showed me, oh, this is what I want to do. I love it. And then I started reaching out to other optometrists. I would really encourage y'all, if you haven't already, find optometrists in your local community that are either in private practice, or it can be even in a Walmart or a Target, or just different modalities that you can gain your experience. I would look on their website usually and do some research, and then either call them or email them or fill out a form on their website, and just asking, hey, I'm a student in undergrad, or hey, I've graduated and I'm planning on applying to optometry school. Do you have any suggestions for me? Is there any way I can shadow you? And usually they get back to you and they're really positive and encouraging. And even if they don't have any opportunities available at the time, they might can recommend other practices that they know of that would allow you to shadow. But I really would encourage you to try to reach out on your own, and just find different practices and definitely shadow different modalities, because that's what showed me and gave me a bigger scale of what optometry is. Because shadowing just one specific thing like a private practice doesn't really give you insight into what an MDOD practice is, or like what vision therapy is.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with that. And then I don't want to repeat everything that she said, but just to add on to that, the doctors that you do shadow, ask them who they recommend to shadow in the area. And a lot of times they'll give you great doctors that they know that love to teach students, love to have students shadowing them. I ended up shadowing with a great ophthalmologist a few days a week and had a great experience with that. And from there, I shadowed his optometrist that he had working for him. So once you connect with one doctor, a lot of times you'll connect with others.
Thank you. How early in the cycle did you apply?
So I applied at the very beginning of the cycle. I was one of those students that Mr. Robertson kind of mentioned that needed to retake their OAT. I still would really recommend that you still get your application completely complete. Still submit it. Let the school know that you are going to retake the OAT if you have to, and that you are preparing a different way for it. Because then they had already reviewed my application early on, even though I had to wait those, I think it's like 3 months if you're going to retake it. To retake it. And then that way, right when I sent the school my score, they contacted me immediately about an interview. So I would definitely highly recommend you apply early, even if there's something you might have to retake.
So I was on the opposite of that, where I started my application early. Like I said, first day Optumcast opened, I familiarized myself with the website, created a timeline for myself, and a goal for me to submit my application. And with that, I just kind of created a plan. I had let all my people who I wanted reference letters from, I let them know well in advance, and also sent them reminder emails along the way to when I wanted to get those in, and let them know that I was also like, I had a timeline that I would like to submit those by. And with that, I interviewed early and kind of just got a head start on that process, which I was glad that I did because I was also working full time.
Thank you. How did you approach the short essay, and how long do you feel it took you to complete it? To follow up with that, any recommendations for those who may be uncomfortable with personal statements?
Yes. So I don't really remember how long it took me to write my short essay, but I do kind of have some recommendations that might help y'all. I know sometimes it's hard when you're trying to think about what you want to say about yourself, because there's so many different things you could list. And a lot of times it can end up being a laundry list of things you've done, which, as Mr. Robertson mentioned, that's you're going to want to put that later in your application. So I would really recommend just kind of coming up with one big idea, such as you want to go to optometry school to help people, and then kind of build upon just one big idea, finding out little and little things about yourself, and it'll really build your essay. Instead of trying to think of the perfect essay, I would just come up with a big idea and then expand from that. That's really personal, and it'll kind of write itself.
So I would say it took me 2 to 3 weeks to write my essay. And before I started, every night I would just write down some ideas that I had, just honestly old school brainstorming. And then after I refined a few ideas, I went with one. One thing that I tell a lot of people is think back to a moment that kind of like inspired you to go on this path. I had a moment that inspired me, and that's what I wrote about. And I just had to refine that a little bit more and how I wanted to frame that moment. And then after I wrote my essay, give yourself some time because you're going to have to rewrite it. I would recommend that you have people look over it. I have friends in graduate school. I have friends who are English majors. You can also, a lot of times you have advisors in your school who look over your essays. Highly recommend that you have multiple people look over your essay before you submit your finalized version of it.
Thank you. What was the interview experience like for you, and how did you prepare?
For me, this was probably my favorite part of the experience because you really get a feel for the kind of like what the school is like. For me, SEO is a very family oriented place, and I really got to feel that in the interview, something that you don't necessarily always see like in an online setting. I guess preparing for the interview, I would just kind of read over your entire application, your personal essay, everything that you submitted, because then it reminds you of why you want to go and it'll really guide you when you're answering those questions. But I would also say that the interview was not just like a list of questions they were asking. It was definitely for me more of a conversation and just kind of, they just really want to get to know you for you. So it was not an intimidating experience at all.
Yes, I agree. Interviewing was a lot of fun. I agree. Traveling and going to get a feel of the different schools and how they differed from one another. As far as preparation, again, I would go and speak to your pre-med or pre-optometry advisor at your school. A lot of times schools will host mock interviews. If you can have your friends do a mock interview with you or your parents, that way you can just get your wiggles out, any nervousness that you might have. And there's a lot of times there's questions online. That way you can kind of familiarize yourself with questions that just might be asked. That way you can kind of know how you would want to frame your answers.
Thank you. So final question, what general advice or recommendations do you have for students who are looking for ways to make their applications stand out?
My biggest advice is just volunteer and really get involved in something that you're passionate about. I think a lot of people, sometimes you think that you have to get just involved in optometry and working at a clinic or something like that. But like we both said, we are definitely not the traditional route. And I just think volunteering in general and showing that you have other passions and other interests, whether that be sports or volunteering in the community or getting involved in clubs and leadership organizations, I think that just shows that you are passionate about different things and want to continue doing those things and being involved, more so too when you get to graduate school.
Yes, absolutely. Any extracurricular involvements, and if you're working full time, finding time on the weekends to volunteer at your local community clinic or community center, Boys and Girls Club, anything like that. And then finding something that you actually truly enjoy doing so it doesn't seem like work. And you'll find that you will just rack up the hours doing that, just something that you truly do enjoy.
Okay, thank you both so much. So what is going to happen next, we're going to open it up to questions from the attendees here tonight. Please feel free to use the chat to type any questions or the Q&A feature. I know we had some chat questions, I think, from Mr. Robertson from earlier in the meeting. So let me go back and double check real quickly. Alrighty. One of the first questions we had, Mr. Robertson, was your thoughts on a 4.0 GPA with an OAT below 300.
Well, I got a story, and I got a story for everything in life, it seems like. We have actually had 4.0s with 290s and 280s apply, and we did not interview them. There's something not connecting for that candidate. If you've got a 4.0, but you can't get above a 300 on the OAT, my first question is, did you memorize a lot of that 4.0? So it may seem harsh, but we are pretty strong on that 300 being the minimum. And again, a 4.0 with a 300, it puts us in a quandary on how to, is that person scholarship worthy? they probably would get some money. I'm not trying to say that a 4.0 through 4 years of school is something that's not good. But the way we look at it is the OAT is an equalizer to some degree. You know, you say your school was really hard and I say my school was really hard and everybody says their school was really hard. Okay, well, everybody go take the same test and let's see how you do. And that kind of, again, it's not a perfect science, but it does help to give some distinction amongst candidates. So yeah, 4.0 is great, but we want to see at least a 300 on the OAT.
Thank you. And we had a question here. I think it was addressed, but if you want to revisit, should you apply during the summer before your senior year?
Yes, without a doubt. You know, like I said, you can go into September, but once you start your senior year, things start to snowball. New classes, new social events, new everything, and you start getting involved in those. And the next thing you know, it's October. And the other thing you have to remember is when you apply, it doesn't mean, you know, in the next week we can interview you. So sometimes you apply and it takes a week or two for Optumcast or longer to verify your file. And then we get it and it takes us a few days to go through and review it. And then we offer you an interview. Well, if we go back to on-campus interviews, we are often offering interviews weeks and weeks in advance. I mean, I know there's times where in August we're setting up October interviews. So don't think that just because your application is finished that you can, you know, get in right away sometimes. The longer you wait, the longer your wait for that interview is probably going to be.
All right, next question. Is there a period before June 30th that will allow us to see the application to be prepared to submit by the time Optumcast opens?
No, I know everybody wishes that, but no, and they're not going to do anything until that day.
All right, thank you. How do you apply for the contract seat?
Well, you don't really apply for it. By you applying for admission and telling me you're from one of those 9 states, I'm automatically aware that you could get that contract seat. So we are the decision maker on it. So even if a candidate is ignorant of the process and we interview them and tell them about it, they could still get that contract seat. Now, eventually you have to submit documentation from your home state that says, yes, this is to verify that Aniel is a resident of the state of Georgia. But that comes later. You don't have to have that in order to apply for admission. You just have to have that if we award you a contract seat. So again, there's no actual application for it. It is simply applying early, indicating the state you are from on your application. And then it's basically first come, first served. So the first 6 candidates from Georgia who are accepted will probably be offered a contract seat.
Thank you. Can official transcripts be ordered in the summer?
Yes, what you're going to do is when you go into Optumcast, they even have you can actually fill out a form on there. You don't have to do it this way, but there's a form you can fill out. But you're going to contact your registrar's office at the schools. Now remember, don't send that transcript in before you've applied. They're going to throw it away, literally. So you have to have an application on file and then the transcript come in. So just make sure you talk to or correspond with the registrar's offices at each school you attended. Give them, that'll be an address you'll send it to. And I think it can go also electronically now. But either way, you cannot send it. It has to be sent from the school.
Alrighty. Is it held against us if we work a year in between graduation and attend optometry school? Between graduation and attending optometry school? Or is it recommended to go to optometry school right after graduation?
No, that's a personal choice. There's nothing, when you start getting into 3, 4, and 5 years away from graduation, then it can, sometimes become an issue. But many candidates, you heard both of these young ladies say that they took some time off. A lot of people like that. They like that year or two of working in the world and making sure they're making the right decision. It's totally a personal decision.
All right, I think this next question is for our ambassadors. With you both being from Georgia, what made SEO stick out to you?
So, you start, Anya.
So I am a first generation college student. I had no idea what I was going into when I was applying for optometry school. So I applied to literally every single one on the Eastern Coast, like including Chicago and Indiana, and I interviewed at all of them. And so I had a tough decision to make between all of the schools, because every single optometry school, in the end, you're going to become an optometrist. In the end, you're going to get a great education out of it. So what it came down to me was the culture of the school, their didactic program. SEO really stuck out to me because they really had a strong didactic program, and that came out especially in their board scores, especially the year that I was applying in 2018. Not to mention, I don't know if you have seen the Eye Center or been to SEO yet, but the Eye Center it's just huge. It's just huge. And so when you go into it for the first time and you see the facilities and the patient care that we're able to provide and the services that we're able to provide our patients, not to mention just the services that we provide to Memphis at large. We have a mobile unit that goes out into different areas of Memphis. And that was all very important to me because I'm very into community service. And so the fact that we were able to do that, were all very important to me. So to me, SEO really did a great job of taking care of Memphis. And I could just really see myself walking the halls there. And every time I walked into an optometry school, I asked myself that question was, could I see myself walking the halls here every single day? And with SEO, that answer was yes.
I think Anielle did a perfect job of explaining too. That's very similar to why I decided to come to SEO. Additionally, for me, yeah, like when I walked in the doors, I was like, I feel at home here. I feel like this is a community where everybody cares about one another, even like all the way to the security team. They're always so welcoming and kind and get to know us. So it's just the whole community at SEO, not just the professors, not just the students, but the entire staff is really just a nice big family and really cares about us. Also, I think the community service, like she said, was a huge driving point for me. And then additionally, the larger class size, since I went to UGA for undergrad, it was a huge school and I did want a larger class size to get to work with more people, get to know more people. So that was another thing that drew me here.
All right, thank you both. I think this is a question for Mr. Robertson. Would a community advisor, CA/RA job look good?
Yes, we get a lot of students who've been RAs or CAs, and that is dealing with the public, really. I mean, you're having to deal with undergraduates that are often looking for life, quite frankly. So yeah, that's a very good position to prepare you. I mean, you're going to make money and you're also going to learn your people skills are going to be much better.
Great, and then we have some questions from the Q&A. Are virtual shadowing hours acceptable? I haven't been able to get into offices due to the pandemic.
Probably. I mean, I hate to say right now anything is we've just had to become so flexible with the pandemic. So what we say is yes, and do some interviews. I would like to supplement your shadowing with interviews where you can talk to someone and get some better answers.
Alrighty, next question. Hello, I am a college senior in my 30s and I've been working as a scribe for a local optometry office for the past 8 years. Would you still recommend the 30 to 40 shadowing hours? And should they be with ODs only or with ophthalmologists as well?
What I would say is, you've obviously got plenty of experience, but what I would recommend is getting outside of that one office, not necessarily 30 to 40 hours. I would say find an office that's one of those ODs recommends to you and go spend 4 hours, 6 hours, and maybe a second office and get another 4 hours or 6 hours. You just want to see some different perspectives. And the same thing, yes, we encourage ophthalmologist shadowing. What we don't like is that being the sole source of expertise, because ophthalmologists go a different educational route than optometrists. And sometimes a candidate will, be a little pushy and say, well, I've, shadowed this ophthalmologist, and they say it almost like it makes them better. And, my point always is you're not going to medical school. An ophthalmologist goes to medical school. You're going to optometry school. So yes, you've got plenty of hours overall, but just maybe get the OD where you work to send you to another office.
Alrighty, next question. What are your thoughts on student athletes? How does this play into my application? I am a Division I student athlete and have had not much time to get shadowing hours in. Also, can I add shadowing hours after I have submitted my application?
We love athletes. Some of our best students have been athletes. And the reason is the time management aspect. Most student athletes have to juggle. You're traveling to games, you're playing games, you're practicing, and there's not a lot of time to do things like shadowing. So we still want to see that shadowing, but you can also add it. Yes, you can go in, you can even list future shadowing that you've already lined up. Now, don't just say, oh, I'm going to shadow sometime. You've got to tell me who and where and all of that. But you can list future things. Just make sure it's clear that you are planning to do that. So just try. And I'm gonna sound like the mean old man here, but there's time. Everybody has the same 24 hours, and it is much harder when you're an athlete. But you do have those occasions if you will plan appropriately and look at your schedule and see, okay, I'm going to have this time off and this time off. You don't need 30 hours in one week. 30 hours can be accomplished by doing 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, etc. So keep that in mind. Keep being an athlete, because it's going to pay off for you. But try to get in that shadowing when you can.
Alrighty, are there any circumstances that may be different for a non-resident applicant from the Western states, for example?
No, not really. We have more states in our entering classes than any school in the country. We have done that for the last 10 years, I would say. There's about 40 some odd states represented in our student body. The only thing that's different is you may not get to see as many different aspects of the profession on the West Coast that you would in the South, but that's not a detriment. We get students from, like I said, from all over. And the only thing is you can't get, if you're not from one of those 9 states, you have a better chance of getting a scholarship. I didn't really make that clear earlier, but if you're from one of those 9 states and you get a contract, well, that's a lot of money. So we try to give the scholarships to people who don't get that money from the state.
Alrighty, what is the ideal amount of hours you'd like to see students take each semester upon admission?
Well, we really like seeing 15 hours or more a term. I mean, you're going to be taking, ask these young ladies, 21, 22, and 23 hours a semester. So, sometimes students will say, oh, well, I only want to take 12 hours because it'll make my GPA better. Well, not necessarily, because we're going to look and say, why were you only taking 12 hours? So the more the merrier, quite frankly. And if you have multiple semesters with only 12 hours and 13, we're going to ask you about that. So try to get in 15 or more every semester.
Okay, and do you have any tips on finding places to shadow? Because of COVID, every place I have talked to has told me they don't let students shadow right now.
Well, the first place we tell everybody to start is with your own optometrist. And if you don't have your own optometrist, then you need to find one. Set up an appointment so you can have an exam, but start with your own. They're more likely to allow you to do things. I really have a problem sometimes with practicing optometrists who don't let you shadow. And people try to say it's a HIPAA violation. No, it's not. They just have to get the permission from the patient. So I know it can be tough, and don't feel, send us a note, send me an email. My email is mike.robertson, ROBERTSON @sco.edu, and say, tell me where you live, and we'll look up and see if we have any alum in that area, any alumni. And if we do, we can't promise you they're going to let you come shadow, but we will usually send you their name and say, look, tell them you're applying to SCO, and that we recommended that they call you.
Alrighty, so I believe that was our last question, but I'll ask again. Do we have any remaining questions for either Mr. Robertson or our two student ambassadors? If so, please feel free to type in the chat or use the Q&A. Alrighty, we have a question. Do you have any suggestions to make up for any lack of available extracurricular opportunities due to the pandemic? For example, my university's pre-professional health club isn't currently meeting, and I was looking for other ways to make up for that.
Well, I think that's when you have to get creative, and you have to, create your own activities, if you will. I mean, if it's just learning about the profession, you can do a lot of that through internet, and that type of research. But if it's really being involved in something, I think that's when you switch and try to volunteer. I think most hospitals are going to take volunteers. You're going to have to follow protocol, but you are anywhere. So try to reach out to different places. And again, remember, you don't have to, all your volunteer activities and extracurriculars don't have to be related to the health professions. I love reading about candidates who work for the Humane Society or something like that. So be diverse in your search.
Okay, one other question. Would volunteering in an eye clinic also count towards the 30 to 40 hours of shadowing?
Well, it's going to depend on what that volunteering was. It may not, because shadowing is when you get in the room with the doctor and in the exam room, and you can follow him or her in their activities. If volunteering means they make you sit at the front desk and file things, that's not going to be as helpful, because when you have an interview, you're going to be asked about, well, tell us about where you shadowed and what you've done and what you observed and what do you think is a pressing issue and those types of things. So it really just depends on what they're allowing you to do as a volunteer.
Alrighty, one additional question. Are those credit per semester preferences going to hold back an individual who has worked throughout school and has children?
Oh no, work trumps everything just about. And that's what we look at, we see, and you're going to tell us those things in your essay. So no, we understand that people have to eat and put food on the table and take care of families. So in no form or fashion would we hold it against the person. We'd want to know that. So, make sure it's clear in your essay or whatever.
Alrighty, so I believe that is all of our questions. For those of our participants and attendees who are still on, if you do have any questions later, please feel free to take down the email addresses for all of our panelists and representatives who are on the screen right now. And I'm sure all of them would be more than happy to communicate with you at a later date. But I believe that brings us to the end of our webinar. I know we have covered a lot of information tonight, and I hope this all has been of assistance to you as you start on your optometric journey. Our next webinar will be held on Friday, May 21st at 2 p.m. Central Time, and the focus will be living and learning in Memphis. This will be a great chance for prospective students to learn more about our incredible city and hear from current students about their experience of living and learning here. If you haven't done so already, I invite you to request more information by signing up for our inquiry form. You will receive a personal advisor and a personal brochure with information relevant to you and your goals/experiences. Thank you, Mr. Robertson, and our student ambassadors for sharing your time and experiences. And thank you to all of our attendees who have joined us. We hope to see you all at the next webinar in May, but in the meantime, have a great rest of your week and take care.